At 11:30 on the frozen morning of December 22, 1944, Private First Class Leo Palmer crouched in his foxhole south of Bastogne, Belgium. The snow was waist-deep, the temperature had dropped to -20 degrees, and the air stung his lungs with every breath. For 48 hours he had not tasted hot food or felt the warmth of a fire. His hands were so numb he could barely hold his Browning automatic rifle. From the whitened tree line, 4 German soldiers approached under flags of truce. Their black boots gleamed. Their long wool coats billowed with each step. They looked warm, confident, well-fed. Everything Palmer and his frozen comrades were not. The lead officer, Major Wagner of the 47th Panzer Corps, carried an ultimatum in his briefcase: the complete and unconditional surrender of the American forces in Bastogne within 2 hours, or face total annihilation. The Germans believed they held all the cards. They surrounded Bastogne with 5 divisions, tanks, artillery, and veterans of the Eastern Front, against one exhausted American Airborne division. The weather had grounded Allied aircraft for nearly a week. Ammunition, food, and medical supplies were dwindling. The situation seemed hopeless, but the Germans didn't know the man commanding Bastogne. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, a 46-year-old artillery officer who had never learned the meaning of surrender. Within minutes, his response would become one of the most iconic moments in military history. The Battle of the Bulge had begun 6 days earlier, on December 16th, when Hitler launched his final gamble, a surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest. 200,000 troops and 1,000 tanks smashed through thin American lines, aiming to split the Allied armies, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The Germans achieved complete tactical surprise. They moved at night, kept radio silence, and even used horses to avoid detection. American intelligence missed every sign. The units in the Ardennes, green divisions resting after heavy fighting, were the least prepared for what was coming. Amid the chaos, the small Belgian town of Bastogne became the focal point. 7 roads converged there, making it vital for movement through southern Belgium. Whoever held Bastogne controlled the German advance. Eisenhower understood instantly and ordered the 101st Airborne Division, resting in France after the brutal Holland campaign, to move out. But the division's commander was in Washington, his deputy in England. That left Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, the division's artillery commander, temporarily in charge. A quiet, scholarly man from Washington, D.C., McAuliffe had spent decades behind howitzers, not commanding divisions. Yet, by circumstance and destiny, the defense of Bastogne would fall entirely on his shoulders. The 101st's journey to Bastogne was a nightmare, 107 miles in open trucks, through freezing sleet and darkness. Men stood for hours in the cold, dressed in summer uniforms, their jump boots freezing solid. They had no winter coats, no gloves, and no idea they were heading into one of the fiercest sieges in American history. By December 20th, the Germans had cut every road leading into Bastogne. 14,000 Americans, paratroopers, tank destroyers, clerks, and medics were surrounded by 5 enemy divisions. The town's 8,000 civilians hid in cellars as artillery pounded day and night. The medieval stone walls that had stood for centuries crumbled under the relentless barrage. Temperatures plunged to -28. Men urinated on their rifles to thaw frozen bolts. Frostbite claimed more soldiers than bullets. Inside Bastogne, McAuliffe moved among his men, visiting foxholes and basements, encouraging exhausted paratroopers who had not slept in days. He saw men with feet swollen from frostbite, sergeants commanding platoons of 3 or 4 survivors, and teenage privates still holding their lines. Supplies were gone. Artillery shells were counted by the dozen. Medics performed surgeries without anesthetic, washing and reusing bandages. The defenders knew they were alone. No air support, no relief, no escape. And then, that morning, The 4 Germans appeared under white flags. Led blindfolded through American lines, they were brought to division headquarters, a cold stone basement lit by lanterns, where McAuliffe slept on a cot between 2 maps of the front. When his chief of staff woke him and said, "The Germans want to discuss our surrender," McAuliffe blinked, sat up, and muttered, "Surrender? Oh, nuts." He read the typed ultimatum, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it in the trash. Hours later, when protocol demanded a reply, his staff debated what to say. McAuliffe didn't know, until an aide reminded him of his first reaction. Smiling, he took a scrap of paper and wrote, "To the German commander, nuts, the American commander." The message was delivered personally by Colonel Joseph Harper. When the German officer, puzzled, asked, "Is this affirmative or negative?" Harper replied, "The reply is decidedly not affirmative. If you continue this foolish attack, your losses will be tremendous." The Germans were driven back to their lines, bewildered by a word they couldn't even translate. One asked what nuts meant. The American interpreter grinned and said, "It means, go to hell." That single word raced through the foxholes of Bastogne faster than any bullet. Men starving, freezing, and outnumbered 5-1 began to laugh. If their general could joke at a time like this, then maybe things weren't hopeless. "Nuts!" became their battle cry, defiance made flesh. For the Germans, it had the opposite effect. Their intelligence officers had assured them the Americans were finished. But now they faced an enemy who refused to yield, who answered annihilation with sarcasm. It sowed doubt, and in war, doubt is fatal. The next day, December 23rd, the skies cleared. The sun broke through for the first time in a week. Within hours, Allied C-47s appeared overhead, dropping 144 tons of supplies. Ammunition, food, and medical kits drifting down on parachutes. The same clear skies brought P-47 Thunderbolts screaming down on German positions, blasting tanks and convoys to pieces. On Christmas Eve, under bombardment, McAuliffe typed a message to his men by candlelight. "We're fighting. It's cold. We aren't home. All true. But what have we accomplished? We have stopped cold everything thrown at us. We are giving our country and loved ones at home a worthy Christmas present, and making for ourselves a Merry Christmas." The message was read aloud in foxholes and cellars across Bastogne. Some soldiers wept. Others smiled through cracked lips. All knew they would hold. That night, the Germans attacked again from all directions. Panzers rolled through the snow, engines howling, firing point-blank into the American lines. In one sector, a provisional company of cooks, clerks, and walking wounded, led by a bandaged major, fought off a German breakthrough. They held the line for 3 hours until reinforcements arrived. By dawn, 42 German bodies lay in the snow. The Americans had lost 18. Bastogne still stood. On December 26th, the siege finally broke. Tanks of the U.S. 4th Armored Division smashed through German lines and rolled into Bastogne. "How are you, General?" asked Captain William Dwight, climbing from his Sherman. McAuliffe smiled. "Gee, I'm mighty glad to see you." Bastogne was free. General George S. Patton arrived days later to congratulate him personally and pinned the Distinguished Service Cross on his chest. But McAuliffe, ever humble, insisted the real heroes were the men in the foxholes, the battered bastards of Bastogne, who turned one word into a symbol of resistance. Across America, the story spread like wildfire. Newspapers splashed the nuts reply on their front pages. Radio announcers told it like a legend. Letters poured in from mothers, school children, and factory workers. One company even offered to ship 10,000 pounds of nuts to Bastogne. The phrase entered military folklore, whispered again at Chosin Reservoir in Korea, and at fire bases in Vietnam, shorthand for courage when surrounded, defiance when outnumbered, humor in the face of death. After the war, McAuliffe rose to full general, commanding U.S. Army Europe before retiring in 1956. Wherever he went, he remained the nuts general. In Bastogne, the main square was renamed in his honor. A Sherman tank still stands there, scarred by battle, overlooking a monument inscribed with that one unforgettable word. Each December, the town gathers to remember the siege, the snow, the hunger, and the spirit that refused to break. To the men who lived it, nuts wasn't just a word. It was hope, courage, and defiance distilled into a single syllable. The sound of an army that would not yield, and a commander who reminded them that even surrounded by death, laughter could still lead the way to victory.